Welcome back to Brashenomics on our Real Estate Monday. Welcome back. Ryan Leopold joins us again from Cobalt Mortgage with nearly $1 billion in loans funded over his career. Ryan, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us again.
Good to be back.
Yeah, well, it is always fun to have you. And he's coming from the mortgage business, you being in the mortgage business. We kind of speak the same language. Mm-hmm. When people are out looking for houses over the weekend, which is pretty common.
Sure.
When people aren't working, that's when the real estate agents are, right? A lot of people come back with questions. They're trying to understand, is this the right decision for me? Should I be buying a house? Mm-hmm. And especially for first-time home buyers, there's some real key items people need to be thinking about before they jump into just buying a house, aren't there? Especially from the finance side.
Yeah, and I think what we found over the years, the biggest challenge is a lot of first-time home buyers really don't even know what questions to ask when they meet with a lender or really what the best process should be to get started. So I think you just want to take some time and actually get into that a little bit because I think that's where people don't feel as comfortable and it's educated and is formed because they don't really know what the process is. So it's a good thing to kind of jump into.
Well, that first piece seems to be the financial side. The carrot, of course, is buying a house. Yeah. Nobody gets excited, rah. Gosh, I really want a mortgage today. Can't wait to spend $2,000 a month. But on the flip side, you're probably going to have a roof over your head. And if you're not buying a house, you're probably going to be renting one, in which case you end up with rent. So that kind of is that first financial decision, isn't it? Rent versus own? Well,
I think what people are coming to more, it seems like more these days than it was maybe 5 to 10 years ago, is everybody doesn't have to own a home. It's okay to rent. I think it's just understanding some of the advantages and disadvantages of buying versus renting and kind of figure out what's best for you and your family, not only now, but well into the future. So I think that's something that as a new buyer, they really have to understand kind of, is it the right thing for me and is now the right time to do it?
What are some questions renters should be asking themselves?
Well, I think first is, are they going to live in the area? I think, are they going to live in the area for a while? I think number two, do they want to have the kind of, you lose a little bit of flexibility when you own versus renting.
So, well, that's true. I mean, you're tied in when you own a house versus renting.
For sure. Yeah, renting, I mean, you can get up and move at a moment's notice. Once your lease is over with, you can move to a new place. You can move out of the area pretty easily. But when you own a house, you can't just move and kind of transition quite as simply, especially when it's not as easy to sell a house. At least over the last couple of years, it wasn't as easy as it was in the past.
So when you start thinking about that, I guess being transient versus not, that becomes a big part. What about from the financial side? A lot of people wonder, well, the rent will be less than a mortgage payment now, which seems to be becoming more and more prevalent.
Okay.
So, when people start thinking about their mortgage payment versus just paying rent on a monthly basis, what's some advice that you have?
Well, I'd look at two different things. I think one, the rents are going up quite a bit. So I think with interest rates being as low as they are and rents going up, and it's kind of hard to find good rental properties these days, especially if you have a family, that I think you need to understand that cost versus the two is kind of equalizing out a lot more. Rents are going up, mortgage payments are coming down because the cost of mortgages or cost of money is so cheap. But I think it's also going to be, is renting the right thing for you in general, kind of from a financial standpoint, because the costs of owning a home are just pretty high too, that people don't always think about. That, you need window coverings, maybe you need a new couch, maybe you have landscaping costs, you got to get a lawnmower. I mean, all these different things go into owning a home that you necessarily don't always have to worry about when you're renting.
Yeah, well, and it gets expensive too. I mean, typically your house you buy maybe more square footage, so you end up paying more money on a monthly basis.
Sure.
Just simply for the heating bill. There's maintenance. Maintenance is expensive. We're going through maintenance right now at our house. Mm-hmm. And, just even the materials, let alone all the labor you go through. But then the advantages, as at least for right now, I mean, you do get those tax benefits, which are pretty key when you buy a house.
Yep. Tax advantages are nice. I think some of the advantages of just having control of your own home and being able to live in your home and make the adjustments that you want, knowing that a landlord can't come in after your lease and say they're not going to extend your lease and or raise your rent at the end of 12 or 24 months. So I think just having that stability and knowing that you're going to have your own place for an extended period of time, I think helps out a ton, because renting can be kind of a hassle. And for someone who moved 6 months ago, moving is not fun. So having to move every 12 to 24 months is not a good experience either. So I think that's a huge benefit there too.
We're here with Ryan Leopold, Cobalt Mortgage. Ryan, so, once you kind of decide that rent versus own, now you got to really look kind of within. You got to understand some numbers about yourself, understand your finances. One of the big things that I know that you're a big proponent of is kind of understanding what you qualify for or what you should be purchasing versus what your max pre-approval is.
I think that's a big one. I think when you start having that first conversation with a lender, I think you really understand the first thing is always going to be pre-qualification. I think it's a good idea to see what lenders look for in your situation, how you kind of stack up in a way. There's always three things that lenders look for. They want to know what your credit's like. Have you established credit in the past, and do you have good credit and paid things back in a timely fashion? And at the end of the day, they want to know what your credit score is. Number two, they want to know you have a job. They want to know how long have you been at your job or in your industry and how much money you make. And the third thing lenders want to know is how much you have saved up, and of the money you have saved up, how much you're comfortable using as a down payment. So I think it's understanding how you fall in line with those three categories and having a conversation with a lender, maybe just a 5 to 10 minute informal conversation, will kind of get a good dialogue there with you understanding kind of, if I'm a buyer, am I on the right track to buy? Okay. And from that, you want to get a good idea of not only what you can possibly qualify for or get approved for when it comes to a monthly payment, but more importantly is how much you feel comfortable with based on all those numbers. Because, we've talked about this before. Lenders will still approve you for more than what you're comfortable with. So I think that's important. From the consultation standpoint, a buyer needs to work with a lender who's going to sit down and actually go through probably a little more in depth of a conversation than just, hey, you're approved for $400,000 and go buy a $400,000 house. I think it's looking at those numbers differently. Yeah,
it does seem to be. And, you talked about the verifying assets and a down payment. And there's a big piece of that of, well, you need to keep some money on the sidelines. You don't need to put every penny you have into your down payment. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make sense either.
Well, and I think a lot of people do that too. They say, I've got X amount of money set aside for down payment, which I think is great. But once you get in there, maybe it's good to use that much money and maybe a little bit more to get better terms and conditions for financing. There's a balance. Or maybe it's good to take some of that money and actually pay off higher interest debt and put less as a down payment. So I think it's a combination of, at the end of the day, what most buyers want to get to is, this is my situation. What do I qualify for? And then when we get through it, they want to feel comfortable with the house they can buy. What's the purchase price? How much are my payments going to be each month? And what am I using as a down payment as far as out-of-pocket funds? So those three things, once you get through kind of the education phase and knowing how you stack up, that's kind of what most buyers want to get to the bottom of and feel comfortable with those numbers.
It seems that those numbers and the comfortability standpoint is more important than what the bank will actually give you, because everybody's situation is so different. And, when you do buy a house, maintaining your lifestyle is oftentimes something you want to do. Mm-hmm. As much fun as it is to, be at home and own a home, there's that flip side of, well, I still want to go out to dinner sometimes. And those things have to be factored in because the bank doesn't think about those things. The bank looks at your credit report, what you can afford based on that, not necessarily, you like to travel. And that doesn't really get figured in.
Well, yeah, as a first-time home buyer, I think you really have to get, especially if you're taking that step from having a $1,100 a month rent payment, living in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment, to now buying a $400,000 house that's 3 or 4 bedrooms that's now costing $2,800 a month. Plus, you're going to have all the other costs that go into that when it comes to taxes and insurance and utilities and all that stuff, and just the maintenance that comes through owning a home. I think that's a big step that buyers need to be comfortable with. And I think the best way to do that is through education and information. Give them everything they need. Even if they meet with a great lender and they have a great consultation where they build that relationship and get all those questions answered, I think it's that next step of, reading the book that you put together, which was great. Website we put together, lbmortgage.com. We have all videos on there that helps first-time home buyers and move-up buyers really get to know what the process is like, and in a lot of cases, proactively answer a lot of the questions that they may have as they go through the process. So that's something we put together specifically to educate buyers and sellers about what to expect throughout the process.
Well, it's all good education and information. And hey, stick around for a little bit. Have you at the end of the show, and then actually kick off the top of the next hour. Ryan Leopold from Cobalt Mortgage. Ladies and gentlemen, when we come back, For the first time, Mike Tran's going to join us, real estate broker with John L. Scott. My name is Ben Brashen. You're listening to Brashenomics.